Yeah. It's so for a man to upgrade his sex life, there's a few things. And I did say this before, but I want to double click on it, which is most men have this unconscious expectation that every sexual interaction must end in must end in ejaculation. And it's not even questioned. And so when that outcome is already predetermined, then you've kind of like short circuited in like an entire universe of other possibilities.
Mm.
Chances are it's going to probably be quicker than you would normally want it to. So I think like one thing I would say to upgrade your sex life is to release this idea of ejaculation as needing to be a requirement for every sexual interaction. Second thing would be, porn. And I know this is something that like we had on the list to talk about. And, porn was something that when I gave it up for 4 years, one of the fastest things that I noticed that came back were all of those like micro sensations that made being with a woman beautiful. Like most porn, guys aren't watching porn from like the very beginning because it's like it's cheesy and it's stupid. Like, how am I going to watch these people act with like the pizza delivery guy or the pool cleaner, and I'm going to listen to them talk about? No, guys like fast forward and jump into it's just like now we're ramming each other. It's down the throat, and when guys condition themselves to that and then go from one clip to another, there's a desensitization that
Mm-hmm.
happens, right? So what happens is guys will bring that into their sexual experiences where they have to pornify their partner and pornify the sex. So everything has
Mm.
to be fast. These positions have to be ridiculous. Many guys will play videos of what they watched before instead of connecting with their partner. And I talked to countless women about this where they're like, oh, I know exactly when that moment where I turn into just like he turns into porn guy and I'm just being banged around, kind of like a body for him to masturbate into. Like women can feel this, and where he's disconnected or he's in his head or he's performing and it sucks. So if a guy wants to upgrade his sex life, a part of it is like, how are you practicing? Like, can you wean yourself off of porn? Take a 7-day hiatus, maybe downshift from bukakis and gangbangs and whatever else you're into. So something maybe softer core. And can you condition if softer core porn can't turn you on, there's a problem with that. There
Mm.
is a problem if you cannot be aroused by something that's softer. It means that you have gone way too far and
Mhm.
you've conditioned yourself, which means that like when you get into bed with a real human being, and we're finding, especially with the millennial population, they're getting into bed with fewer human beings because they can like so
Mhm.
easily satisfy themselves with porn. They don't have to face rejection or risk or these kinds of things. Their fantasies they can indulge in without having to worry about expressing it to someone who thinks it's weird. You want to upgrade your sex life, then
Mhm.
you really have to be meticulous around the kind of porn that you are watching. And no one else is going to be watching this, like is going to be making these decisions for you. You have to be the one. And if you don't feel like you have the discipline or the willpower to unwind that, then you need to start talking to other people, other men that
Mhm.
can serve as accountability partners for you to say, hey guys, for this next week, can we do a challenge? No porn or softcore porn only or whatever. And I found that like when I stopped watching porn and I was in a relationship at that time, my God, like her body, like the softness of her body, I could feel like the pads of my fingertips used to be like numb. Like when I would touch her body, I wouldn't feel anything.
Wow.
Like then when I would touch her, like I could feel her softness. And when she
Mhm.
would touch me on these different parts of my body, I could feel it versus the numbness and like her scent and her hair, like all those little things.
Mm.
And since then, and that's been 8 years of really practicing, like when I'm with a woman, man, those little parts of her, and there are endless parts of a woman to be explored. You like that curiosity, that mystery goes away when we're just like programming with porn.
Mm. Yeah.
Sorry, I got on my high horse there.
No, it was awesome.
Yeah, I think for me what it brings to mind is this other piece as well. So like this the porn addiction is so real, and we're getting deeper into it as you explained. There's also this piece that I guess I don't hear it really talked about often in this space, but we're going to do it now. So for me a lot of the reason to show up in sex with men and to have a hunger for sex with men in my life has been about getting validation from the man, which means I was completely like subsetting or just completely denying pleasure, receiving pleasure, like the ability for me to receive pleasure for myself. And instead, I was receiving pleasure by getting validated by him, which is a kind of ass backwards thing to be doing and extremely unhealthy. And I think that's also born through this porn culture, but also can be born through many other traumas in our early life. So that piece of validation, I think when we talk about conscious kings, and awakening the king within and being a conscious lover and getting to know yourself and becoming integral, having integrity, all these parts play into that as well, of being able to recognize when your partner is like, if you're a man and you're able to recognize when your female partner, or whatever partner for that matter, is coming at the sexual encounter with you from a place of seeking validation versus her wanting to receive pleasure, that's some magical shit.
Yeah.
Some serious shift can happen, I think, there. And not to put it all on the man, because obviously me as a woman, I needed to recognize that for myself, take responsibility for myself in that. But if you happen to be the more conscious partner in relationship, guess what? It's your responsibility to kind of start laying that path. So yeah, you want to touch on that some, Dom?
Totally. So thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for sharing that part of your experience.
Yeah.
I've been with a number of partners who are like completely open and conscious and totally receptive to receiving pleasure. And I've been with others who I think would fall into the probably like would relate a lot to what you just said. And what's been kind of interesting is some of the women who have been similar to what you experienced, Mercedes, around like they used my pleasure as a validation for them. I found a theme that many of them wanted to be tied up and handcuffed because it would kind of like be the only way they could surrender to like just not ejecting from when I gave them pleasure. Like it kind of became kind of a sign I looked for. So bondage happened to be, not for all of them, but like for some of them seemed to be this thing.
Makes sense.
And yeah, it goes back to, again, if I'm the more conscious partner, in many cases, like I tend to be in that situation, it's like really having to create an environment and a setting to say, today, this sexual experience is going to be about you and you only. I'm not even taking my boxers off. You're not touching my dick.
Mm-hmm.
Laying you down. Here's what we're going to be doing. What else would you like? And I got some surprises in store for you, right? And we're going to be here for a while. And, again, something that you all brought up in your pre-questions were, there are 3 types of potential orgasms that a woman can have.
I didn't know that until I heard that from you.
Yeah. And then that's not I mean, that's one of the things that I learned from reading David Deida's book, The Enlightened Sex Manual. And if you don't mind, I'd love to read you a passage on this because I think it may relate to a short one. And then we'll talk. Awesome. So, okay, here we go. There are 3 types of women's orgasms. There's at least 3 types of women's orgasms, at least, okay? Clitoral, vaginal, and cervical. Most women and men know only of the clitoral orgasm, which is a relatively superficial pleasure, a shard of trembling quickness. Without intimate knowledge of vaginal and cervical orgasms, many women remain unsatisfied without ever knowing why. This dissatisfaction may extend far beyond the sexual occasion. A woman may feel something missing in her heart. She may feel an emptiness, a yearning that her man doesn't seem to be able to touch, try though he might. So what goes on to be explained in here are the 3 different types of orgasm. So the cervical orgasm is kind of compared to a man's orgasm. It's quick, kind of surface level, and then it's potentially depleting. Like after it's done, you'd rather kind of go to bed or lay and cuddle than go further. A vaginal orgasm and a clitoral orgasm may take like 10 to 15 minutes of stimulation. Can happen relatively quickly. Some women take longer than others. The vaginal orgasm is something that happens deeper. It happens on the inside, typically like referred to as the G-spot orgasm. Some women have like a very well-defined G-spot, others not so much. It's not as like well-defined and may take some searching. From what data says, it can be like 30 to 45 minutes of stimulation. And it may take, for a woman who's never had a vaginal orgasm, it may take like weeks of practice, maybe even months, for an opening to occur, because there could be closure there around wounds, trauma, not feeling safe with a man. There could be stuff that's, in there that needs time. And those can be more replenishing orgasms, full body energy shifting. And then the last part would be the cervical orgasms, which I haven't experienced with a partner yet because I just learned about these too.
But I heard you say it's like connecting to God or something like that.
Yeah, like these are described as like those transcendent, earth-shattering, like kind of God experiences where if you've had one, It's not kind of like I've had it. And, you know, some women have said, I just got fucked open to God.
Mhm.
And that can take, you know, up to an hour of stimulation.
Wow.
And so that requires like a partner who's committed to creating that space, to being there, to holding that space. And it takes you to fully surrender, to allow that amount of time and attention and that nurturing and that care, and not having to feel like there's some ledger that's like,
Mhm.
okay, now that I'm getting an hour of this, I have to give an hour-long blowjob tomorrow.
Mhm.
Like that kind of stuff. So yeah, those are some of the big ones. And
This
I'll
is
pause there.
there's a beautiful practice that we did with Maddie Moon, who you know, in her Sisu Society when that was an active workshop, which was about basically how you can fuck yourself open to God.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, and in it
It's my favorite practice. I
yeah.
didn't know where you were going, but
And she talks about yearning and longing, and that the feminine energy is this essentially this void that's never going to be fully satisfied by a human man. And that the thing that you need to bring into your sex and your, especially relating with a romantic partner, is, you know, the masculine God, or however you want to look at it, this God essence that will allow for the satisfaction that women constantly crave for. I think she calls it the 4-foot cock of consciousness. So it's kind
well,
of
that's the Osho name,
Mm.
but or the Osho name is the divine fuck. She calls it the divine lovemaking or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, it's a beautiful,
so
you know,
good.
image of what that means, right? Like you could not be more full of this energy, and that's really what you're receiving if you can bring God into your sex. So I don't know. I thought that was kind
Yeah,
of
it's
addition.
worth buying Sisu Society just to be led through
Yeah.
that call, and then Dom does a Art of Revealing, is that what it's called, with her,
Oh,
that
yeah.
was really powerful as well. I also love how you've talked about like holding a woman after she
Mhm.
comes, and that is like, I had never, again, that's another thing you introduced me to, because I had never even heard anyone talk about that until you.
To know to ask for it. Yeah, like didn't know we were missing that.
Well, usually it's like it doesn't end till the man comes, and sometimes
Yeah.
she hasn't even come. But the fact that you stop and hold her after she comes that's just a completely different practice than people are used to.
Yeah. It's, you know, I've found a lot of, when I say a lot of, like, I don't have a lot of partners. I've like, most people think because I have like sex addiction in my history that like I'm this prolific, but especially over the last like, you know, 6 or 7 years, I've had very few partners. But I found that many of them have never had this experience of having an orgasm and then being able to just like bask in the afterglow of that orgasm, because usually they're just kind of thrust into the next sexual situation, you know, like now the guy is going to be taking her in a different position. And so there are times where I've been with partners where they've come to orgasm, and, you know, like there's that climax, there's the breathing, it's coming down. And as they're coming down, you can almost feel them like turn their attention to me and then start whatever, riding up and down again, or wanting to, you know, go down on me. And I've had to be like, stop. Just feel that. Just feel that. Keep your eyes closed. You know, breathe that. Like, feel that in your body. Let's just hang out with that for a little bit, and just drop your body onto me, you know, or I'll, you know, just lay there on the bed. And for moments, just like guiding her through, just take the deep breath. Where do you feel that? I feel that in my belly. Great. Can you circulate it up to your chest and down your legs? Feel that in your head. And sometimes we'll just end it there. You know, like we'll continue to do that, and I'll be excited. I'll still be hard, but I can sense that like she's really enjoying that piece. And then I'll be like, hey, why don't we just take a little break and cuddle? How would that feel for you? And she's like, you sure? And it's like, yeah, that has felt really good for some of my partners. Some of my partners are like, no, let's get back into it. It's like, okay, I'm ready to go, you know. But that, if you want to talk about upgrading a sex life, Jade,
Right.
you know, like one thing a man can learn to do is hold the partner after the orgasm. She trusts the shit out of me after that's over, right? Because this is one of the things that David Data and John Wineland always talk about. Take her deeper than she's able to go on her own. And like Jade, you just said, I've never had that experience of being able to have an orgasm with someone. I didn't know that was a thing. If you were with a partner that created that experience for you, like, and took you deeper than you were able to go on your own out of all your sexual experiences, what would that do for your desire for that man?
Oh yeah. So much trust is born there. It's just such a script flip of what we're used to in relationship with men, especially in our younger years, where men oftentimes don't care about the woman orgasming.
Well, they don't even want to hold, they don't even want to be like, after they're done orgasming, it's
Yeah.
not even like the hold, it's the rush off to the shower or, you
Yeah.
know, whatever it is. And the Magdalene manuscript, it talks about how like, you know, it has this whole like awakening Kundalini process and all that. And then, but it talks about how like you can awaken your Kundalini and do all that. But if you rush off after like being in her egg or her bubble or, you know, giving her your seed, whatever it is that they worded it. But if you rush off after that, then like the process is not complete. That like, that's
Right.
one of the main, most important steps is that you stay in each other's presence after that. And that too is like, that's really hard to get a guy to do. So for a guy to stop before he's even come and just hold is
It's so much about it. So much of it is about slowing down.
down.
And
Yeah.
Dom, when you described, you know, you walking her through this process and then saying like, would you want to just cuddle and just leave it there? To me, that brought up this even like a fear sensation I could feel from my stories of, am I being selfish? Am I like, I need to give more than I receive essentially, or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I wear the mask of saying yes when I should say no. Like this is a core
Yeah.
wound for me, but that comes up for me. And I think for women, a lot of women, they've experienced that where it's like your needs and your pleasure are secondary to
Yeah.
this man finishing whatever
Mhm.
he's going to do here.
So here's a great story. I have a sexual partner right now. We're not exclusive. She lives in the West Coast in Los Angeles, and she has another lover that's local who's, you know, she's 27, he's 27. He's not conscious at
Mm.
all, right?
Mm.
And he also falls into that category, Jada, of like the big dick guy that has not learned anything other because he's just so
Mhm.
used to having a big dick and like, you know, says, and he's one of the guys that falls into the category of he wants her to orgasm for his ego, not because
Mhm.
he's actually
This is another
satisfied.
thing you've said that really stuck with me.
Yeah, I think one of the posts I put on Instagram was kind of like there's two types of guys. You know, the one type
Mhm.
of guy who wants you to orgasm to satisfy his ego, and then there's another type of guy who wants you like who gets pleasure from your orgasm because he loves to see you in your pleasure. Know
Mhm.
which guy you're in bed with, right?
Yeah.
And you know, like Mercedes, I think there's a lot of you can tell which kind of guy you're in bed with, even on an unconscious level, right? You know, and what I love to allow my partners to feel is I am so here for your pleasure. You know, like when you are in pleasure and when you are going deeper than you've gone before, when you've had an experience that's fulfilling to you, like there's nothing that lights me up more than that. And because I've also trained myself to not need an ejaculation every single time that I have
Mhm.
sex, it's like this watching you reveling and say that example, like Mercedes, if I was with a woman who's had like your life story
Yeah.
where she's sitting there in bed and now reveals to me, wow, my whole life, like I felt like maybe this is selfish. And cool, let's sit through that. Let's just let that come up.
Yeah.
Let's let that come up in that worry and then allow that to pass. What's on the other side of that? You don't even
Mhm.
know yet.
Trust is
Right.
on the other
Yeah.
side of
Yeah.
that.
Trust. Cool. And then when that happens, then what happens? Then where do we go on the next sexual interaction?
Exactly. Now we're safer and we
Mhm.
can, you know, journey into unknown territories
Mhm.
and be adventurers together. But yeah, no, I mean, I feel it, you know, as you say that, and it's something well, we played a lot with here today, but also just generally in my life, that's something I think I'm really playing with now is seeing those stories come up. Like during a
Mhm.
yoni massage, for instance, I know a lot of women like get weird about yoni massage because you have to be so intimate with yourself in that
Mhm.
moment.
Yeah.
Like for me, my first yoni massage was like all this emotion flooding out. It was not about like having an orgasm, not even one little bit about it was. And I didn't know what to expect going in, but then all this emotion came out, all this, you know, I could see the stories of shame. I could see like where I had been like robbing myself from receiving pleasure. And to have a partner who has even just a molecule of consciousness, you know, to be able to like hold space. I'm not saying that's my husband. I'm saying generally, like out there in the world, if someone can just hold, if a man can just hold a moment, you know, like slow down for a moment and say, like, what is here and let it happen without trying to
Mhm.
like fix it, even just let
Yeah.
it happen and come to the surface. He's holding space that is going to create a kind of trust that most women are not privy to in their lives with
Yeah.
men. So.
And when a man can become masterful at holding space, like the feminine partner can go to dimensions that like a guy
Yeah.
has no idea how to go to, right? I mean, like,
Right.
and so I get to witness that. I get to take part in that. Like, I marvel at the feminine's ability to experience bliss and pleasure. I mean, you have at least three different types of orgasms. Like,
And
what
we
the
can
fuck?
have multiple ones
And multiples, right?
pretty
Like, I mean,
easily. Yeah.
come on. I mean, like, I don't have that kind of access. And even just like watching a woman transmit her pleasure, like I can watch a woman sip a coffee and eat a pastry. And if she's like sexually connected and she's biting into it, and you could see the pleasure. I can feel that in my body. Women can transmit in a way that like enters my body, that like, if I watch this, like a guy who's really enjoying a pastry, and like it doesn't have the same kind of radiance or electricity, right?
Yeah.
So if a man can get really good at holding space and allowing her to go to depths and to like, then that ends up cycling back into that sexual union.
Yeah.
And I've gone to some crazy ass places just because I'm riding I'm on the ride.
Yeah, what a
I think you've
beautiful
intrigued the
invitation.
men listening.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. It's such a beautiful invitation to create that space so that she can get into those realms and you can travel with her, so to
Yeah.
speak.
I know we're
You're
running out of
leading.
time. I wanted to I want to go back to porn addiction a bit because I know you polled 200 women on 3 questions. So I wanted to talk about that poll, what the questions were and what your realizations were through that poll. And then just, other things on porn addiction, whether it's tips for men who have the porn addiction, or I know a lot of the men that I know who have porn addiction were exposed to it by an older man, like either like let them watch it or almost like made them watch it. And so there was like this, I don't know if that goes into, if the way they're exposed to it, if that goes into how they become addicted.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I'm curious too, how women can support men in that journey and when it's time to just go, because all the women I know who are with men in porn addiction they're hurting,
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Great
There's
question.
a lot of ways to approach that.
Well, you don't have to answer all of those, but wherever, those are all the things that I wanted to bring up. And I know you also brought up like something around like, you can use ethical porn, you can use OnlyFans. And I know a lot of men, like you had brought up, like anytime you were having anxiety or wanting to turn off or tune out, you would use porn or masturbation or sexting. Mercedes and I both have an OnlyFans. And I think a lot of times men may come on for that reason and we may entertain it a little bit, but we may entertain it to, get them in conversation with us. And then we also invite them to be more vulnerable with themselves and to do things like what we talked about on this episode. So I love that you brought that up as an option.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I'm not anti-porn. I'm really not. I mean, like, for 4 years, in Sex Addicts Anonymous, everything was like porn is villainized, and I'm not anti-porn. You just need to be, we need to be a lot more intelligent about the kind of porn we're watching, why we're watching it, the effect it's having on our sex lives, the effect it's having on our sexual identities. And when you've been able to answer all those questions, then you can start to decide like what role porn plays in your life. And I still, very rarely, but I still engage in porn every so often, but it's usually when I'm not with a sexual partner. So anyway, I would ask most guys and the guys who are listening, if you think about the part of you that you bring to porn, is it the best part of you? Like, is it your best self? Like when you sit down to watch porn, are you showing up as the greatest version of yourself? Or is it usually the part of you that's feeling tired, overwhelmed, anxious, lazy? I mean, it's usually the part of you that's like on some level broken or fucked up. And if you can recognize that that's the energy that you're bringing, then then it can start to cultivate an awareness of what's going on at a deeper level in here, right? Like kind of put a pause on that. So that's the first thing I just want a guy to even think about is like, who are you when you sit down and you watch porn? It's typically like some part of you that's in a negative energy. So I'm going to ask the three of you these questions, or these 3 questions to the 2 of you.
Okay.
That I asked to the women in our audience. Number 1, do you believe that most men have an unhealthy relationship with porn? Yes or no?
Yes.
64% of women said yes out of the 200 that responded to mine. So 36%. So basically 2/3 of women believe that most men have a bad relationship with porn. Number 2, have you ever had a partner who seemed to desire porn more than you?
No.
Desire porn more than me? Yes, definitely.
Yep. Okay. 40%
Well,
women
I should say not that I know of.
Would you suspect?
I was with someone who was a sex addict and a porn addict, but the desire seemed equal.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. 40% of the respondents said yes, they had a partner who seemed to desire porn more than the sex with them. And then 60% said no. And then the last question I would have for you is, a man who watches porn a deal breaker for you?
No.
If it's a regular occurrence for me, yes. But like you said, if it's like every now and then no.
Okay. So, and Mercedes, you said no, it's not.
No.
But I'd like to add that it does change dependent on how he's using it and what he's like. I'm so involved in the sex trafficking, like trying to end sex
Yeah.
trafficking. And I know that that money goes hand in hand. Even if you're watching free porn, the ads are generating money and that fuels sex trafficking. That's a really big topic, but because that's such a passion of mine, there's no way I could be with a man that does that. So it's
And
more
I-
of, so
and
it's
I
not,
cel-
it's not about like that he's watching another woman. It's more about where the money's going to.
Jaden, and like I celebrate that part of your work. I've seen, a lot of your posting about that, and most guys don't even stop to consider like the system that they're, that we're perpetuating. There's a documentary that Lisa Ann turned me on to. It's called Hot Girls Wanted on Netflix.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Heartbreaking, heartbreaking. And it doesn't get into the child sex trafficking, but it does get into kind of like how vulnerable women are manipulated into this industry, chewed up, spit out, abused, put in violent situations. And guys, like if you're watching porn with, like, you go into these big porn aggregators, Pornhub, Brazzers, RedTube, or whatever else is out there right now, and you're just indiscriminately going on, it's, you are perpetuating a system where there are like child sex trafficking and other things. So you should be asking the question, like, where is the ethical, free range, organic porn? And you need to know that before you go in there, because like when Nike was using child labor to build their shoes, or, these other companies, like, you voted with your dollars. And until we stopped and demanded better, did some of those conditions change? So I needed to put that in there, Jade, because you brought that up, and thank you for that.
Yeah.
So when it comes to porn, especially in partnership, here's one of the problems that I see. So many guys like are not in partnership and they're indiscriminately using porn, building a habit, and it becomes a ritual. And like a lot of guys use porn daily.
And that's
Like,
where they're getting their sex tips. And that doesn't, it's like, I've heard that saying, it's like watching, what's that like race car movie that everyone with Vin
Talladega
Diesel?
Nights. Oh,
Yes.
Fast and Furious.
It's like watching Fast and Furious to learn how to drive is like the way I've heard it.
Yeah. So they're getting their tips that way, but they're also building a habit pattern. Throughout the course of the day, they're checking porn 3, 6, 12 times. And now they end up in a situation with a partner. And all of a sudden, you're supposed to take all that energy that you've dedicated throughout the course of your day that's been reinforced into a partnership, and to go cold turkey like that, like taking 6 cigarette breaks a day and then getting into a relationship and stopping smoking. It's very challenging to do. And most guys don't know how to bring it up in their sexual partnership because their partner may be triggered by sex or by porn. So it becomes a secret. And there's also, like when I polled the women in my audience, a lot of women were very triggered by porn and would have like destroyed a man for bringing it up. And so guys just kind of keep it a secret. They continue to watch it. The partner doesn't know, but kind of knows. And it becomes kind of like this thing that never gets talked about, but there's a wall in between the two. So what would my guidance be in that situation, especially as like we're talking about having better intimate relationships? Men need to understand the habits that they're building. And like, if you're single, but you want to end up in a relationship, you got to understand the habits that you're building right now. And if you're showing up every day, 6, 12 times a day, it's not going to turn off when you end up in a relationship. And you got to be willing to know how to talk about that with your feminine partner. And when it comes to women who end up in partnership, I would say, even if you don't like porn and you're triggered about it, you have to learn how to be safe to talk to about it. Because if you explode when a guy brings it up and he realizes that it's like the third rail for
Same
you,
with your sons.
yes, exactly. Like if you want your sons to talk with you about it, but then you kind of come down with the force of God, and then like
You're no longer a safe place. Yeah.
he'll never bring it up.
Yeah. Your second question, will you state your second question again that you asked in your poll?
Have you ever had a partner who seemed to desire porn more than he desired you?
Yeah. So this is, I think, something that a lot of women deal with that don't realize they're dealing with. So in the sense of, I'm going to use it in my own personal relationships. I know that in bed with me, the sex is desired. And when we get to that place where we're connecting intimately like that, the sex is desired. However, the slowing down is what becomes the undesirable part, which is because of the practice of porn that shows you the Fast and the Furious, method. And the slowing down and taking time with a real human being woman is what I think a lot of men, or especially men that I've had this experience with, are almost like allergic to, just because they first of all don't know that the benefits that can come with it, I think. Right. And then they already know this is the way I get off and it's easy and quick. And they built up all these other reasons to not be intimate with their partner or themselves, which is the bigger part, because of their own shit that they need to do shadow work probably on. And they have brought that into the bedroom and said, oh, this is taking too much time. Oh, you're going to take 30 minutes to get to a place where I can enter you and finally have penis and vagina sex. Like, that's just too much time. I don't desire this. It's not that they don't desire you as a woman, if anyone's listening and can relate to this. It's that they don't desire being intimate with themselves because it's fucking scary.
Yeah.
And to slow down that much would mean that they would have to actually experience self-intimacy.
And one of the things, Mercedes, to make this even more poignant for the man who does exactly what you're talking about, which is he's learned what's made him pleasure, like he's learned his pattern, and then he'll do that with you. And every guy will have like a ticking time clock where it's, hey, it's 2 months, it's 3 months, it's 6 months, where that becomes boring for him.
Yeah.
And then he needs a new partner because he's running the same pattern. And when he's doing, and he's pigeonholing you into like that own one. And I've seen that with so many guys. Brian Stacy, my podcast partner, said that like that used to be like how he used to roll. I used to roll that way too. When you learn how to slow it down, when you learn all these other realms of sexual exploration, then you realize that like your partner, she's got like, you can be the kind of guy that has sex with 1,000 different women, or you can be the guy who has sex with one woman 1,000 different ways.
Right.
And I believe that every feminine partner has the ability to have an infinite number of sexual ways that we can explore together. But if you're running one pattern as a dude, you're going to get tired of that partner. You're going to blame it on that partner. And it's not that partner's fault. It is your fault.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, it's so slow. What I'm hearing here is slowing down leads to birthing creativity into your sex life. The variety that you're seeking for is actually the slowing down is what can create that in whatever relationship you're
slowing down to not have like a slow death, basically.
Yeah. I heard a comedian the other day say something about like, y'all men are complaining about fucking a dead corpse in your wife. Your wife is like a dead corpse. You killed her.
That's funny.
So
Who said that?
I don't remember. I'm going to have to forget.
We have a lightning round of questions right before we close off. And I did want to go into how you talk about, like, if you want the king in your man, then like to speak to his king energy, like tell him you're my hero. And I love that. But I did not know that you know so much about the menstruation cycle and men's involvement in that. So if you have time, I'd rather touch on that. Absolutely. If you don't, then we understand.
Hell yeah. I'm always here for a good menstrual cycle conversation.
Okay.
Wait, before we do that, I'll say we'll probably just cut this little blip out because Jade, enter that maybe in a second, just enter the menstruation conversation, bring it up again. But I do want to also ask you on the end of this porn addiction conversation, specifically about sex workers, because like Jade mentioned, we consider ourselves sex workers in the field of working in OnlyFans, and having men enter this work, the work that we end up doing with them, but enter this work through that sexuality on the forefront piece. Since so many men are willing to go there, they're not afraid of that.
People try to shame us for, being on OnlyFans, but Mercedes and I always joke, like, if your boyfriend's on OnlyFans, you better hope he's on ours, because we're like telling him to read David Data and things like that.
That's awesome.
So I guess my question to you is, being a sex addict, or having come through this world of looking into how you have gone into sex without intention, right? Without consciousness necessarily for a large part of your life. And then getting confronted with knowing porn stars, like you said, one of your good friends was a former porn star, or now knowing us who are sex workers, and we have our OnlyFans for kings is what we call it. By the way, there's a lot of girls with OnlyFans that aren't thinking about how to make a bridge.
We're not saying we're doing it better. That's not what we mean. Yeah.
Right. But men are entering this space because they're comfortable with the sex worker on the forefront and the sexiness on the forefront, they know that well, through porn and what we've already discussed here. What is your outlook on that? And do you see that there can be a bridge from entering sexy looking work and translating that, or sexy looking something
like, can
that's
that also lead to liberation, is what you're trying to ask?
Can that translate? Can you enter something like we're trying to do with our OnlyFans and with our workshops and that type of thing? Can you enter something that's sexy at the forefront and allow it as a man to be a bridge for you to get to inner work and get into intimacy work and this type of thing?
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, I find like most guys need a Trojan horse to actually get into the inner work. And, like I'll Trojan horse things like how to last longer in bed and 5 practices to be a mentally tougher man, like these kinds of things that will eventually get guys into their hearts and their emotions, and then thinking about purpose and these kinds of things. And sexuality absolutely is one of those ways. I mean, for me, when I hit my first bottom, one of the first personal development books I ever read was The Way of the Superior Man by David Data. And a big part of that is like mastery around sexual energy, which is what taught me breath work, which has taught me how to last longer, which has taught me how to hold space for women in being a masculine man. And so like when I recognized that I was having better sex through these inner work components, then I got really curious about what are these other dimensions of inner work. That was really truly one of my entry points. And so if the two of you are at the forefront of, hey, come to our OnlyFans, we're 2 beautiful women, we know how to speak to kings, and like I'll meet you where you are, because you think you're just going to get like this beautiful woman with a beautiful body who knows how to speak sensually, but I'm also going to hit you over the head with a little bit of data and do some of this inner work stuff too. Yes, like you've met them where they are, and then you start to guide them where they need to go. And I do think that like one of the cool offshoots of this COVID era was like the explosion of OnlyFans and how many people, how many new sex workers ended up in that space, and how it's actually broadened the sexual experience, where it's not just this like one size fits all porn.
Totally.
Right? Like there's one woman who's a listener of our show. Her name is Anna Winters, who does like these audio erotic porn that like I started listening to every so often. I'm like, oh, that's cool, because it actually requires that like I visualize, and it slows things down. And
I really like that, actually.
I love that.
You're using your imagination. A common message I get from women is that using sexuality is manipulation, and basically it's like witchcraft, it's like the religious programming. But that from men, it's mostly, and this is mostly like men who care about us, but it's mostly like, well, they're not going to take you seriously. Like that's not what they're coming there for. So it's like, those are the 2 common messages, but I know that
those are all true.
I know that what my intuition, I don't feel that it's witchcraft.
Well, it is witchcraft in the sense of, why were witches burned at the stake in the first place, right? Because they were so powerful with what they were offering that it was scary, especially for, the patriarchy that was being born. I don't even like to use that term as a negative, but this dogma that was being born, that we can't have these women that are intuitive, AKA magic or psychic, able to express their power in the world, because we can't contain that.
Yeah. Well, scary. When I was getting a lot of those messages from men and women, I did like take on that shame, and I got a lot of pain in my left shoulder blade for a while that I couldn't get rid of. And the intuitive that I spoke of earlier in the show, her name's Mary Margrave. She's amazing. The message she gave me that really resonated with me was like, sexuality in its purest form is when you like merge it with spirituality. So like, post the sexy images and bring with it your gold, it's when it's in its lowest form, that it's void of spirituality, is when it becomes the porn addiction and the sex trafficking. It's when you come at it and you're using both, that it's like, that is like the highest form.
Yeah. And even biblically, that like, Jade, you've talked about this a lot. Mary Margrave, maybe be one of the people who brought it into our lives as well, is Mary Magdalene, right? Of the Bible, the whore and the holy woman. She is a witch of all witches. Like, she literally was able to take those 2 concepts that in our world right now, the world, the society sees it as contradictory, but they can live together. That's what we're doing with our work, you and I, Jade, especially with our OnlyFans, and saying like, yeah, you know what? This is existing. We are alchemizing.
Well, she was called the whore. She was called a whore. She wasn't actually a prostitute. She just was a tantric
Doesn't matter.
teacher.
Matter.
I know.
There's a story.
I don't want people to discredit everything you're saying just because of that one word. So I want to clear that part up.
Yeah. The thing is, the people who are going to discredit it are just not ready for the work. They're just not there yet. And they'll come around because this is where they're getting the exposure, you know, and it's probably something that's taboo enough to interest them anyway.
I mean, I think that, you know, go back to the witchcraft comment. Like, I do believe it's witchcraft, but I believe witchcraft is like a powerful thing. It's a beautiful thing. It means like you said, alchemize and transmute. Witchcraft is given like this bad term.
They call it sorcery, the male version, and suddenly
right,
it's okay.
Yeah. And I mean, and here's the thing. It's like, because we live in this world where like sexuality seems to like there are these powerful forces that want to control sexuality and have like a very strong opinion about how sexuality should be portrayed and shown. And these are, you know, in many cases, religious institutions, these kinds of things, right? Cultures, versus like you two get to choose exactly how you want to portray and share your sexuality. That is your choice. And yes, there may be many men who have been conditioned to looking at the way that you portray your sexuality as, I'm not going to take you seriously, right? Then but that's their conditioning, right? That's what they've learned. And there are plenty of other guys who look at what you're doing as empowered, as beautiful, as, and then are open and receptive to like the deeper levels of spirituality that you're embedding in there. So I do believe that like we're having some sort of sexual renaissance where what you two are doing in the next few years is going to be much more prevalent.
Yeah.
It's going to be much more embraced. People are going to see beyond, because most guys are not used to seeing like two beautiful women like you who are also have this kind of depth, who are also ringer, you know, who also do MMA stuff. Like they're not used to seeing that. They have like a very specific box
Stereotype, sure.
So it's just about like breaking that box and then showing them what you got. And I'm sure like, you know, like some of your bigger fans, longer tenured fans, like see exactly what you're doing.
Right. For sure. Yeah. And I think, you know, just to finish this little combo, this piece of the combo off is, you know, we talk about this a lot, Jade, but we are pioneering something. We're at the forefront of this adventure, you know? And so we are the ones who are going to be burned at the stake, so to speak. Luckily, it's not literal like it was for quote unquote witches in the day. We get to try again, essentially, and take, you know, what our grandmothers and grandmothers worked for a long time and bring it back around. Like this is, I think, the right time. It is the renaissance of this work. And it might come with, like I always say, objectify me, like feel free to objectify me. It has literally nothing to do with how I subjectively feel sexy in my own body when I took this photo and posted it and put this caption with it, whatever might, you know, however I'm putting myself out into the world. And when someone, man or woman, comes to that and says, you're just going to get objectified, no one's going to take you seriously, your plight is going to be completely fruitless, that's their projection onto my work. It has literally nothing to do with me because I know exactly my intention. I know my particular worth, and also that I subjectively feel a certain way in my body when I do the things I do and when I give the work I give. So it's really, it doesn't affect me, but I also see that for women and other people that are going to come to this work, and I think there's going to be a big movement, you know, create a whole